Welcome to our asynchronous session for this week. Wanted to give you the first two letters of your access code for the quiz, and they are the letters S and U. S and U. Our asynchronous session for this week. Today we're talking about persuasive essays. Our goal is to be able to identify the elements of a successful persuasive argument and then develop a persuasive argument of our own. So in our course, we are working on a persuasive essay. And in a persuasive essay, we obviously need to have a persuasive argument or a claim that we're trying to persuade others to join. So we're going to be speaking about those things today. But one thing you need to have done before you watch this video is to have read the article. I put a link to the article at the top of the quiz. You need to make sure that you have read the article first so that you will be able to follow along with the information presented here. The link should be a hyperlink on the quiz. So if you have not read the article yet, please stop, pause the video, go back, read the article, and then come back to us. All right. So we read an article from the Sleep Foundation, and I know it's a reputable source because it's a .org. It's one of my tests for validifying sources. And I read the article. I asked you to read the article, and it's about pushing start times later in the day for adolescents. It's funny because I was actually walking my dog this morning, and I passed a middle schooler who lives in my neighborhood walking to the bus stop, and it was dark out. It was like 6:30, and he was carrying a flashlight, and because it was dark, obviously he was being safe. I was like, wow, does the bus come early? My kids are in elementary school, so I didn't realize. So I asked him, what time does the bus pick you up? And he said 6:45. So I bet some of you guys can connect to that. Seems awfully early to me for the bus to come. But he said that the first bell rings at 7:25. So this article I found interesting to read because it does include a lot of good elements for a persuasive text. So let's go through, I put a few excerpts from the article on the screen that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but I want to talk about some things that we want to make sure we are including in our written arguments. Obviously, we need to have a claim or a thesis statement. And if you remember correctly, the thesis statement is your argument. This is what you're arguing for. So in an argumentative essay, you want to make sure that it has a point of view. You want to make sure that it states specifically what your viewpoint is, so that your reader knows what you as the author are trying to persuade the audience towards. You want to make sure that it doesn't wiffle waffle, I like to say. If you're trying to say that LeBron James is the best basketball player of all time, you don't want to say LeBron James might be the best basketball player of all time. You want it to have conviction. Putting that qualifier word in there, might, leaves the door open a little bit. You want to make sure that you're steadfast in your conviction. So you want to make sure that your thesis has a point of view, that it has conviction, and that it is specific and direct. You want to make sure that your reader knows what they're getting into. And we talked a little bit about bias recently as well. We want to make sure that we don't off-put our audience with our thesis statement. We want to make sure they continue to read. So we want to make sure that we deliver it with very little bias, right? The other elements we want to make sure we include in our persuasive document, other than a claim or a thesis statement, is evidence. Whether that be, we want to make sure we include some statistical evidence, as well as perhaps some anecdotal evidence, depending on what our topic is. So if we have those two elements, we can utilize them to back up our claim. And the last one, we want to make sure that we include a counterclaim. Now, if you remember, a counterclaim is the opposite side of the argument. We want to be able to identify for our reader we want to basically identify that argument first before somebody else can, and say, well, the other side of the argument says, but this is why that claim is false. So we want to make sure that we include those main parts of a successful persuasive argument: our claim or a thesis, our evidence, and our counterclaim. And then at the very end, our call to action, which is asking our reader to do something with the information that we've given them. What is it that we're hoping for them to do? And that's typically in your conclusion. You're going to say, after I've given you all this information, I want you to write your senator, lobby your local government, go out and watch LeBron James play basketball. I don't know, whatever it is that qualifies with your argument, you want to include in your conclusion as your call to action. All right, so let's take a look at a few pieces of evidence from the article that we read today. We read, I'll show it to you real quick so you know which article I'm referring to. It's this one right here, school start time and sleep. Hopefully you remember you clicked on this 2 down here at the bottom so that you read both articles, or both pages of the article, I should say. But basically, our claim or our thesis statement is that students do better in school if they get more sleep, and that it's best for students to have a later start time, especially high school students, is kind of what this article focused on, that high school students will perform better in school and benefit from a later start time. So we have a few of the elements of our argument here that have made it a successful article. The evidence element. Evidence suggests that teens are indeed seriously sleep deprived. A recent poll conducted by the National Sleep Foundation, so we have a reputable element here, who's the Sleep Foundation, found that 60% of children under the age of 18 complained of being tired during the day, according to their parents, and 15% said they fell asleep at school during the year. Okay, so this is compelling evidence. This is our statistical evidence, or some of our statistical evidence, that students are tired at school. Second component of evidence, a University of Minnesota school study demonstrates the impact of pushing back school start times. So this is statistical evidence, but also anecdotal in nature. Even though it's not personally anecdotal, it doesn't follow one specific student, it identifies statistical information that has to do with a real-life experiment. It identifies that this school district, the Minneapolis Public School District, changed the starting times of 7 high schools from 7:15 to 8:40. So think about the difference. Like if I mentioned that boy walking to the bus today, think about the difference there. You're getting on the bus or getting dropped off at school a whole lot later in the morning than you are if you're getting on the bus or getting dropped off at school for a 7:15 start. So it says that the study investigated the impact of later start times on student performance, and the results are encouraging. It found that students benefited by obtaining 5 or more extra hours of sleep per week. So that's on average, let's say, if we're looking at just school days, an hour of sleep extra per day. So this is the anecdotal evidence. Hey, look how much more how much more sleep your student can have if the start time is later during the day. Lastly, our counterclaim is included here. Students are concerned about being in school later in the day means that it will cut into after-school jobs and other extracurricular activities, probably particularly sports scheduling. And still, there are convincing reasons to push back school start times. Now, I didn't include this part in the article, but at this point, the article does list the benefits to counteract that argument that after-school jobs and extracurricular activities will be impacted by a later start time. So this is their counterclaim. Hey, we realize that you guys all have stuff going on after school, but look at all these other benefits that come from having a later start time. So these are the two components, the evidence with the statistical and anecdotal evidence, and then the counterclaim. So let's take a look at this element of the article. This is the call to action. So the call to action, I mentioned earlier in the video that typically we see the call to action in the conclusion or towards the end of the article or essay, which is true. In this particular article, it's actually quite in the middle. So we see it twofold here. We see that the call to action is set up with some more statistical evidence that we can cite here to lead into that call to action because it gives us some background information. And then here we see the call to action. We encourage you to contact your representatives and urge them to support this bill. So this is the purpose of the article and the call to action. They're trying to convince us as the people reading the article that schools start times would benefit adolescents if they were later in the day, and a bill has been introduced to the U.S. by U.S. Representative Zoe Lofgren that addresses the relationship between start times and adolescent health. And this article is trying to encourage us to support that bill by contacting our representatives. So that's the call to action. Hey, look, you can do something to change this. If you're a parent and your child is tired and your child's school starts at 7 a.m., work to change. Contact your representative so that they know how you feel about this. So that's a successful call to action. We might choose to not follow that call to action. We might choose to do nothing with that information, but that's what the article is asking us to do. It's saying, look at all this information I've given you. What are you going to do with it? We think you should do this. So when you write your persuasive essay for this class, I want you to focus on identifying what your goal is. What are you hoping that your reader will do with the information you're presenting? What are you expecting them to walk away from your essay understanding about your topic and what to do with that information? All right, so now what you're going to do is answer some questions for me in regards to this video, and then you're going to read another article, and the link is in the quiz for you, and then you're going to do what I've done here and identify the elements of an article. You're going to identify the persuasive elements of that article and then share those responses in the quiz with me. All right? Let me know if you have any questions or need anything at all. Have a happy day. Thanks. All right, so that's a wrap. Last three letters are GAR for your access code. GAR. Have a great day.